Welcome to Carl DeGregorio's Desk Session 58. I got nothing for 58. Numerically speaking. Numerically speaking, I got nothing. I'm not going to tell you I got nothing. I have something today. Other than working on the gratitudes, working on digging out of a little bit of a... I won't say what it is. I'm digging. I don't want to say rut or anything like that. I've just said it, but it's just that ever-present tug of war that has been represented millions of different ways in literature. In Dante's Inferno, it's certain rings of hell. Some of them represent actual evil. Some of them represent lesser anguish, and then further on down, the third ring and all that stuff. Other times, even in cartoons, it's a Bugs Bunny, the good angel and the bad angel, telling you to do good and do bad, and the battle of good and evil, the yin and yang, and many different things are talking about the polarities of thought. And in my case, just overweighting toward the negative. And maybe that's not unique to me. Maybe I'm overstating it. But all I can say is that sometimes when I overweight toward the negative, it's taken a practice. And maybe as of late, I've been having issues with staying in the light or listening to the good angel. And what I do is I try to use this as not that thing. So if there's anything we're all kind of after in these endeavors online, in books, in media, and all that stuff, it's to try to codify and exploit our own authenticity. And so if I come and present to the camera, the microphone, as if things are going well, some might say, that's inauthentic if you don't feel great. And I'm like, no, I think nothing is permanent. And so if you're net negative for a week before I record, the idea that I get to record is a positive thing. Something that I commit to, something that I want to do, something that I'm hopefully getting better at, something that will catch traction as I double down and commit. And so why wouldn't I present? I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's about, I've told this story before, but when I lived on 55th Street in New York, there was a building on the corner, and it was like the back of a building, and it had this kind of granite surface, but it was really polished, or it may not have been my exact block, but it was very close. But there was this granite facade that was highly polished, so much so that it had a reflection. And there was a homeless cat who sort of was the guy who gravitated toward my block, and he didn't even ask for anything. He just was sort of maintaining somehow, barely. And he might have been indigenous. He just was kind of obviously seen too much exposure to the sun. So he had a very weathered and tanned too brown skin, and he would just keep to himself. And on more than one occasion, I saw him shaving with a disposable razor in the reflection of the granite wall. And, with a cup of blue cup of New York coffee, but with water, I'm hoping. And he would clean out his disposable razor, the blue kind, and the blue cup, and he was shaving in the reflection of the granite wall of some skyscraper or some corporate building or some luxury doorman building. And that alone, that juxtaposition is New York, at least in the 90s, in a nutshell, maybe even America in a nutshell, that this polished granite that is so well polished and laminated, or whatever treatment has been done to it, that in the sun it reflects well enough to be a mirror, so that a homeless cat can cling to his appearance and his tidiness and his habits of yore, or the fortitude and the effort to maintain. It was stunning and quite. People say it's humbling. I think it should be humiliating that you would see that effort, that pride, and it wouldn't affect you, and that you wouldn't do what you could. And I don't know if I did anything. I may have, and this is a big if, I may have hooked him up here and there. Probably not. I was very inured in New York to that. Because you would see it so much. But maybe I left there was a Blimpies on the corner of 8th Avenue at the time, and I was in there for lunch almost all the time, and I might have gotten him a sandwich here or there, or left. I don't know. I do remember one time, probably after that stunning moment of seeing him shaving, did I make an effort to make sure he got something from me. But so I would say humbling is too much of a pat on the back. It should be. I don't know what the word would be when you see that. And I guess humbling in the sense of like, because what they say, and this is why I remember saying as I walk by, he stands a chance. He's going to make it. He's going to get off the street, because of that pride, to keep his appearance from getting so off the rails that he couldn't even get, he'd be repellent to goods and services. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a certain point where you are, quote unquote, past the point where you can't, your body odor and your clothes, like, you just, that level of despair we see too much of too. And he was hanging on, and he was fastidious to the degree that he could be, as far as I remember. But just to see him shaving on the street blew my mind. And so if he can do that for the never present job interview, or if he can keep his grooming up on the streets, then he is that inauthentic to, like, who's he trying to impress? Or is it a man saying, I can't let my complete forward facingness be that far gone. I have to hold on to some of these habits, and maybe I just caught a bad break, but I'm going to do what I can for as long as I can. And that is essentially the nature of life, and the nature of why do when when it seems to be like there's no, my theory of living is to break the fucking tape in a sprint, to run through the bag at first base. I use the sports analogies, but and so winding all the way back to, if I've been, quote unquote, struggling over the week, I wouldn't want to come here with that. This is my effort to present the thoughts in my head that are of the higher vibration, the higher nature. I've heard, again with Springsteen, mentioning whether he met all his idols, and he said, yeah, that's a slippery slope, because sometimes they let you down, blah blah blah. And he said it's probably the case for when people meet me, because I write from the highest point, the highest part of myself, as do I. The sentiments I made at a funeral recently, and the refined thought, and the elevated text, and the warble in my voice, and delivering it as sincerely as possible, that is the best of what I have to say. And it's a condensed snapshot of what I felt at the moment, and I repeated it and rehearsed it, and that's not inauthenticity. That is, maybe it's a too broad a comparison, but that is a man who would shave in the mirror of a granite skyscraper to keep appearances from getting too far out of whack on the streets. And I could be projecting into it all the sort of, what's the word, virtue of it. And, and that is the privilege people talk about, to have that perch. But I also think that if I'm going to continue and be artistic, and if we're going to fight against the blue wave of AI entertainment, we have to try to, be precious about our observations, be precious about the sentiments of men, what people are going through, what we can aspire to. To be crass, if a dog video can make you say things and put humanistic communication without words with the dogs, where they have feelings, they then why wouldn't we? That's for me what art does. It is a projection. And so maybe it's not good to project onto family or project onto friends when you're slighted or whatever, or your agent, or something that you start to take personally and you project, and then you do take a leap. But like, that is sort of the practice of writing, of creating, is that you do jump into people's heads. If you could get to the point, the hardest form of writing would be that third person omniscient, because what that writer is choosing to do is inhabit each and every character. So it's not like I walked into the room, the record skipped. I saw a woman on the corner of the bar, and I thought to myself, I'm going home with her tonight. Now, the third person would say he walked in, he saw a woman that resembled his ex, but more with a more upturned nose. And then it would be the DJ is pissed because he is trying to play It Takes Two by Rob Bass, and some fucking drunk Upper East Side white chick banged into the table and the record skipped. And then you would say it coincided with his entrance and him noticing the stunning woman at the corner of the bar. Then the woman at the bar notices him noticing and thinks, you know what? He looks like my ex, And so that would be, you are putting everything in the inner monologue of the three individuals. Then the bartender approaches what he knows is going to be a successful outing, because he knows that the woman at the bar comes in here for hookups, and that it's fish in a barrel, if blah, blah, blah. And so all of that is the omniscient part. And so if I stray and put words in my friends' mouths, or thoughts into a casting director who rejects me, it's not helpful, and it's not healthy and correct. You are projecting, and you are imagining a lot of things, but that is an overworked muscle. It's my tennis arm or my bowling arm is in that realm of interpersonal conjectures and presupposing how someone might feel. You know what I mean? And what at least I'm learning lately, because I've had some harsh assessments, let's say, and then with further information, with the story being squared up with me, I said, wow, I was reading that motherfucker wrong all these years, and that makes sense now, and I see why this or that. And so, and I guess that would come with separating yourself, the artist, and separating yourself, the person. And this blurs that line, but this is probably more the artist than the person, which is why I leave some details out, and I speak in generalities, and I leave a lot off the table, so as not to it's not to play it safe, but I just don't want to tread in certain waters, and that water for daughter, that diphthong, which is what the aw sound is, reminds me of the thing I wanted to talk about because of a recent text back and forth with my buddy Shawnee Mack. We're old enough to not have referred to where my buddy Shawnee Mack grew up as Delco, but he is from Delaware County, and it's kind of gotten this like traction in the zeitgeist as Delco it's a part of Pennsylvania, and it's not quite Philly. It's a little more rural, suburban. If I'm correct in this, because I know Delco people have their shine right now, and they know what it means more than I do. And I'm from up north in New Jersey, so I refer to New York for everything, and I guess suburb culture. But Delco is this thing. We were old enough that it didn't have a vibe. It has a vibe now. It's had exposure on HBO with Mayor of Easttown and this accent, like, and so when they say water, they say water, or they say dirter. And Saturday Night Live did a sketch where they were just rocking that dialect, like, no, that whole fucking thing, and they had that Delco dialect, and Mayor of Easttown had that, and also currently Task with Mark Ruffalo is in that region. I think it's the same producers, so that is their sort of tableau. It's as if they are the Delco Scorseses. So rather than Little Italy as his sort of mise en scène, that whole thing, it's Delaware County Delco. And so my buddy texted me about something, and here's what it is. We went to school in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's got also a brutal accent. They say yins instead of yous, and I didn't grow up saying yous for anything. So when I heard why they were called yinsers in Pittsburgh, I was like, so poor grammar is doubled, tripled down on, and then morphed into yins, which is you guys or y'all for the Pittsburgh, Western Pennsylvania region. And so one of the few good things, I guess, about the algorithms and the internet and social media is you get a tidbit that comes in, and you know exactly who to send it to, and you're probably feeding the algorithm, you're probably feeding the synapse of the AI learning model and all that shit. But when I saw literally like a Pittsburgh local news item was that the Monroeville Mall, is closing. When you went to school in Pittsburgh, we were in the Oakland neighborhood of Pittsburgh, they say. And I don't know, very seldom we got rides, or a couple buddies had cars, and for shit to do, we would go to the Monroeville Mall. And if I'm not mistaken, there was a nightclub. I think it was Dawnsies, which is Donzies, but Dawnsies was in the Monroeville Mall, and we tried to get into a club. So we would go to the Monroeville Mall, and sometimes I would have to go to the Monroeville Mall to shop for shit or whatever it might have been. And so it's going out under, and I sent that to Shawnee Mack, and he laughed about he tried to type out like the phonetic, he typed Monroeville, and then he spoke to me about the Pittsburgh accent there was a baseball player on the Pittsburgh Pirates whose name was Don Slaught, DonSlaught, Don Slaught. And the way you would say it in Pittsburgh would be Don Slot. So it was like a perversion and a flip-flop of the vowel and diphthong. And so when you're in drama school at Carnegie Mellon and you're learning dialects, first you have to learn standard American speech, right? And I don't know. I think when I'm relaxed, tired, or thoughtless, or just riffing, I suppose you could glean a regional dialect of mine being East Coast here and there. But when I was in drama school, they were hammering me for a regional dialect. Now, when I went home that first semester, or at some point, I was the guy who had to go see his old teachers that he loved, and I went to see my drama teacher from high school to tell her how my first year at drama school was going. And I said, yeah, I'm like on probation for voice and speech. She goes, what for? And I said, well, they say I have a regional accent. And she said, you do? You, of all the people, because when you grow up in New Jersey, I might have even been mocked for just not having a typical Jersey guy vibe, so much so that sometimes I would hang out with my Italian American friends, and my mother took offense. I started hanging out with my buddy who was a paisan, and his dad was like a real Italian American pride guy, and he took me to Little Italy, and we went to Il Cortile, which is a really nice Italian restaurant, and we walked around the streets, and I bought a like a Tour de France hat, but it was Italy, and it was the Italy flag, and I rocked that fucker for the whole summer with the cap up. It's like a fucking beanie, practically, like a spiral helicopter hat, but it was a Tour de France cycling helmet with Italian, it said Italia on, and I was like just trying to really get Guido it up, because I wasn't, and somehow I let slip that the father was like, you got to get in touch with your culture, man, your heritage. He was calling me like a white bread wop is what they would probably call it at the time. And I was raised very much to be sort of assimilated, and so when my mom's still pissed off about him, through me, mistakenly sharing that I might want to get in touch with my Italian heritage, and she thought that was the biggest crock of shit, and she was always pissed off, and probably wasn't good for that friendship, and maybe the dude had a rep, I don't know, if you know what I mean. And that's really what she was trying to avoid. And so then you go to a drama school of some reputation, which draws from the entire population of the country. And so being from the East Coast isn't a dominant thing. It is just the thing because there were people from the East Coast, West Coast, and from the Midwest. And so I always thought it was more of an attitude. And what happened is when you're going to college, you recreate an identity. Some people do. Some people change their fucking name. Some people just switch to their middle name. Some people switch to their nickname. I'm Ace. Really? That's your fucking name? Well, it's going to be from here on out because I'm starting freshman year off trying to erase my nerd life in high school. I wasn't doing that. I was just sort of me, which I thought was the all-American boy, and maybe a bit of a drama snob, having been exposed to some professional training and having friends that were older that were going to NYU and seeing plays in New York and being able to, by then I had seen at least 3 or 4 Broadway shows, and I would even take myself into the city and try to get the TKTS through the discount tickets. And so I was kind of a handful of snobbery and all these things. So when I was being told I had a regional accent, which I didn't agree with, I took umbrage to. But then, you do have it whether you don't, whether you think you do or not. And I also, if I was sort of recreating, if you were going to label me with that, or if the New York, New Jersey guys all bonded together and we were cool and we went to clubs and danced at the Monroeville Mall, like if that was going to be that, I probably I messed up. I leaned into a thing that wasn't me, which then got me in trouble with the universe. It was this sort of push-pull that sort of typifies my existence, and also typifies maybe some of the struggles I have in casting, and also self-regard. How I regard myself is often paradoxical. You know what I mean? So when you hear you have a regional accent, which, you know, what they're really saying is you're not talking like an American or standard American, or you're not talking like a theater person. You are being shamed for, this is going back a few, and I don't know if this stuff is still endemic, but I think it is. You're being shamed a little bit for your white ethnicity and non-WASP dialect and diction, which makes a lot of sense, because if you're gonna, not everybody was trying to be on TV in my era of going to Carnegie Mellon. People would make careers going to the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, or some of these places where you could make a living in regional theater. And so all of that definitely skewed in the 90s, skewed white, and from the canon. And diversity was diversity, at least in Theater Week magazine or in the world of casting, they were going for colorblind casting, was starting to be a thing, where some of these activists, and thankfully activist casting directors, were saying, well, why not Danny Glover? Why not Wesley Snipes? So like that stuff was starting to come up. And Spike Lee being an emergent voice, I think that gave black actors dreams to go to drama schools and look at the success rates. And so, but the idea of the study of dialects, this is getting very highfalutin. The idea of studying dialects and where they came from and what they mean to placement in the mouth and what they mean in the vowels and the diphthongs. It's very fascinating shit. And whether you do well with dialects or not could be immaterial to all that academic learning, book learning on it and all that stuff. But if you know that like the Swedish and Norwegian people populate Minnesota, and they have this sort of Minnesota thing, that it's partly their coming to learning English with the muscle contractions of Swedish or Norwegian dialect, and then that leaks into their version of English, and then what happens is then just Minnesota gets a thing, Similarly on the East Coast. But then they factor in things such as weather and urban city. The reason New Yorkers talk kind of clipped is because it's like, shut the fuck up and like, don't talk to me, and you don't. And, the voice and speech I had is you're supposed to talk for stage, and for Shakespeare, you're supposed to give, I'm not joking, a two finger gap between your teeth. And a buddy of mine who was from the Bronx had to literally do his monologues with a cork in his mouth to then get the sense of keeping it that way. And then it was sort of the voice and speech equivalent of putting a donut on a baseball bat, where the cork was in there and you would take the cork out, and then your articulation was real sharp. And so when I got any kind of negative feedback, the only way to mitigate it and to shut it down was to become so proficient that went away, at least vis-a-vis my voice and speech. So I started really leaning into the phonetic alphabet. And there are two schools of thought with voice dialects. A lot of people learn it through pronunciation by ear, and I think it's a combination, but there are people I know that are really good mimics, but they're not really doing the accent. They're getting the spirit of it, which probably carries you further than technically being a dynamite dialect technician. I've forgotten the phonetic alphabet, but when I was really proficient with it, it's literally not a lot of guesswork. It's taking a dialect and transposing it into phonetics, and then putting basically like for standard American English, the goal of the first year was to get to a point where you got rid of your regionalism and have this baseline. And then from there, you don't have to do anything as far as a dialect is concerned. All you have to do is insert a diphthong. The quickest thing I could think of is Z's in German. TH would be a Z. And I don't even know what the phonetic symbol for that is, but like a TH would be a Z in German. Or this is, that boom. All this is right. Boom. You're German in one change of a consonant. And in Irish, it would be mother. Would be mither, and or in Cockney, you would think would be fink. I think, what I think? I think you're full of shit, mate. Like those aren't tricks. Those are literally substitutions, and you would just rewrite. If you had that, nowadays you could double space your script and phoneticize it, and that I was getting really great at that. I enjoyed that technical process, and I love to maybe get back to it. I don't think the requirement for me, once you learn the hard way that the marketplace sees you as about 3 different versions of a 10-degree spectrum of roles, you just don't get to practice that shit anymore. And maybe that was part of why, it made me a little incongruent with my type, especially when I sort of went in for The Sopranos or a movie where I had to play a Guido. Even though I knew it in my bones, I was no longer proficient in that regionalism, which I wasn't in the very first place. I think the idea that I was overly East Coast sounding is and that comes back to Shawnee Mac, and we were talking about the Delco Philly dialect, and I started texting him the idea that I think it's dialects in TV shows like this. It's too much, in my opinion. And I'm sure I'm wrong about this, but like the idea that every actor and every character down the fucking line, if there's 30 people on the show, 30 of them must talk in this word and all that stuff. And I think it has to do, essentially, my freshman year drama voice and speech teacher fell afoul with the department for reasons I don't know and don't care to go into. It's ancient history. I enjoyed her because I learned the phonetic alphabet with her. She was talking about the marketplace more than the stage, and she taught me a lot, and she had the brilliant idea, which I'm sure she copped from somewhere, to record you day one of class on a tape recorder saying these phrases, green fields, right? I mean, these things. And then at the end of the year, you would listen. And so that regional dialect that I didn't think I had, I did, because I was like, green fields. And it wasn't so much that I sounded too Jersey. It was just that I didn't have those pure vowel and diphthongs. Blah, blah, blah. But I have a theory, and it may be up my ass, but the theory being the dialects people have, even if they are clearly regional, are unique to the individual, like a fingerprint. So yes, most people in the Delco region, not most, but a lot of people in the Delco region would say water. There was even a notion in the capturing and in the miniseries about capturing the Unabomber, the character played by Sam not Rockwell, but Sam Worthington, that his character, he's a fucking British guy playing a guy who's working at the FBI. He's kind of just doing generic American dialect, but then he said something about water, and then he said that is a tip that tells me that person's from Pennsylvania. And then he came up with this theory of like syntax, or of basically you write and speak specific, and you could find a fingerprint, and that's similarly how they found the Unabomber. Was they scoured his manifesto and could sort of pinpoint this signature that we all have that would be help you pinpoint where the fuck he's from or who he is. And that's how his brothers heard. That's why they published the manifesto, and that's how his brother said, that sounds a lot like my brother, etc., etc. This stuff's cool. It's very nerdy. It's the stuff I'm into. But what I'm saying is that's all in the hopper, that they these vocal coaches now, this teacher that fell afoul of the department moved on quickly. And the reason she moved on quickly is because she's become an in-demand voice coach. And if you go to her IMDb, I won't tell you who it is, but if you go to her IMDb, she's been working since that fateful time when she was at Carnegie Mellon, probably realizing she could make a lot more money as this guru voice coach, that if you're going to hire her and pay her rate, she's going to whip people into shape in these dialects. And she's not the director, she's the thing, and the director's got a million decisions. And so what happens is everybody's doing the fucking dialect to varying degrees of success, and so you don't have the homogeneity that you want. And that is why it's bothersome to hear all these dialects, and then the overpraise for the British and their efforts to do so, because they are coming from, they have to change their sounds phonetically. Our sounds are different. And so, yes, and they train this stuff really, really difficultly, or they really go for, they probably spend more time on it than we should and do and will. And, you know, and then there's the reverse prejudice that Americans can't do the British accent, and we just never get the opportunity. But everybody on this show, Task, is, you know, a lot of them are Brits. And then there's Tom Pelphrey, who's killing the dialect, and his character, in my estimation, would have a heavy laden Delco accent. But depending on your proficiency, it's like it's going to take you out of your instincts and into your head if you're struggling and you just don't have the good ear, or you don't understand it phonetically. And here's the thing. Mark Ruffalo is the star. He's the reason it's able to be green lit. He's a movie star of some renown and doesn't do the dialect to any degree. I think he throws a water in there or something just to let you know that he gets it, you know. But he's not going to fucking dangle this goddamn dialect with them. And I think he did one in that movie with Emma Stone, and to varied success. But he doesn't do it in Spotlight, and they bring it up in the script. The Stanley Tucci character says, "You're from East Boston, huh? You don't sound like it." So they're either inserting that into the script because Ruffalo doesn't want to try to do a Boston accent, which is tough, and he doesn't want to distract, so he goes kind of neutral and like just a little like I'm East Coast, but he doesn't go full Boston. They either are addressing it with that insertion in the script to explain to your audience why the fuck he doesn't have the Boston accent that a lot of the actors who are proficient with do, or it's a fact of the matter about the actual guy he's playing because it was based on a real character. Who knows? But the point is, Ruffalo's not doing a Boston accent, and he's not doing a Delco accent in this one. And I think he has enough power in the industry, and when he goes to this, that he can say, I'm not going to make an ass out of myself trying this shit. It's backfired before with Dick Van Dyke or whatever, whoever the fuck tried and then, you know, failed. Or you would see a lot of people try it in depending on the continuity and depending on the way they shoot it in the order. You could see them try in certain scenes, probably at the beginning, and then it didn't work, and then they just abandon it. But so it's this pressure to exert the dialects on all these things, and to me, it's sometimes unnecessary. Because I used an example to my friend Shawnee Mack. I said, well, why would I don't have an accent, but my buddy Mike did, right? Why would that be? And he said, well, it may skew along who your folks are. Many people, that's the thing that's not taken into account. My parents are from Connecticut. They both went to college. You understand what I'm saying? And so dialects and how you speak a lot of the time is why it's important to have them. So they're not wrong, but sometimes they're not taking it all the way through. You could be a cat from New Jersey and sound like you aren't from New Jersey. And for this thing could happen if you know city kids, Manhattan kids who grew up on the Upper East Side or the Upper West Side. They don't sound like what you would think, like Joe Pesci and them, because the boroughs is where those accents tend to exist, because Manhattan kids tend to be upper class, even rich kids. So that dialect does not hold muster. But if your director says, characters from New York, where's your New York accent? It's like, well, I'm from 72nd and fucking Lex. Like I went to fucking Horace Mann. I don't have an accent. My dad's went to Yale and fucking and you know, I don't have, I don't sound like that. So I'm saying, you know, a lot of that goes into the hopper. And so when you just hear these dialects that are just, I get it, you're good at it, but it gets to be what I jokingly said to Shawnee Mac as the, you know, dialect industrial complex, or the voice and speech industrial complex. Is like, if you're going to hire these people, they got to justify their paychecks. Or if the actor hires one and gets the studio to pop for their voice coach, they're going to show it off. Now, someone like Meryl Streep, who's known for it, she is savant-like in that aspect. So that is her toolbox. Do you understand what I'm saying? And, you know, and some dialects are tough, you know. South African's bonkers. Boston's tough for a New Yorker because it's too close. And, you know, and then there like, if there were a movie about me and all you had was a certain biographical information that he grew up in New Jersey, you'd say you need a Jersey accent for this character. And it's like, no, you wouldn't, though. You know what I mean? I stuck out as the way too articulate kid, too brainy and all that shit amongst my fucking peers who were rough and tumble. You know, and my mom would always make the distinction between Jersey City, the white flight towns of New Jersey. A lot of them came from urban areas and then further out to the suburbs. And so then that's where the perpetuation of these dialects. And so maybe Delco's an example of that, from Philly out. No, but where do you get, like, you know, and then Pittsburgh with the Monroeville Mall and stuff. And in many cases, people know how to do the dialect, but don't speak in it. And that's the code switch thing that can occur. And I will say, as I've been riffing, I'm sure you probably have heard that I said daughter. I slip. But when I read and when I do a character, I'm going to either be neutral as needed, or I'm going to have to gin up a more New York accent. And I really went off on a tangent today, but it's stuff I'm avid about. And, you know, the beauty of, I guess, getting back to the death session and getting back to the reason why I think I probably have to write and be in things, and why I ultimately tried to do this with my play, and ultimately I have to do this with my one-man show, is I don't fit a very, very clean, clear box. It's all very subjective, and also here's some projecting going on. But to certain people, I am just a white dude, you know. But to other people, I am, you're a little on the edge there of ethnic, you know. And a lot of that has to do with how I talk, or how rapidly I talk, or how much I talk, or how big your vocabulary is, etc., etc. I always hated when there were these double negatives because people are working class. I think it's insulting sometimes. Not everybody talks in a double negative who happens to be a carpenter, you know what I mean, or does construction. Oftentimes, yes, but not every time. And that's on the writer. And a lot of times writers are, you know, MFA, fancy dancy people who want to tell a story and they did their research, but they aren't of it. Do you know what I'm saying? And I don't think that's the case with Task, and that's why they're going for the authenticity of the dialect. And it's bikers and it's guys who work on garbage trucks. So yeah, you want the accent, but there's also poetry there. There's also literacy there. There's also hopes and dreams and aspirations. And there's also things that you're avid about that you keep to yourself, you know, that would change sometimes how you clean up your speech, you know. I say ain't, but I don't say double negatives, you know what I mean? And one of the few compliments I remember fondly from an ex was like, you're the only person I know who can say ain't and still manage to sound intelligent. And that tells you, imagine what her dialect would be if she even made that observation. She's coming from, you know, prep school kind of vibes. You know what I'm saying? So this is a fascinating thing for me, but also it's been what I think has been some of my troubles. And it all comes back to identity and how you feel about yourself. And back to the beginning of this harangue where I was saying, is it authentic to try to put your best face forward? And is it authentic to, a lot of people are offended by the idea of make your bed, clean your room as if it's insipid. But, I pray, and I don't know where that fella from 56th Street is, but, the fact that he was shaving and keeping up his appearance, I pray that he managed to get back up on his feet. And he had I had never seen a tough day like that. And yet, if you don't have that burning discipline or that hope or that pride, that's where you then will slip, lean into being put upon, lean into having it rough, lean into woe is me. And he had it rough by any measure. And you could just imagine just letting it all grow and almost using your body odor and your despair as like a fuck you, that can take hold, and that's not productive. And so I just hope that guy somehow found his way on his feet, because he was fighting the good fight even in a very tough circumstance. And as I recall this, and as I go into all the shit I went into in this harangue about voice and speech and how interconnected things is, and how the minutia of things is the universal. So we covered so many topics about class and race, and all through the lens of a dialect coach or the study of voice and speech. And that's pretty cool. I don't know if that makes anybody interested out there, and I don't know, but it does relate to, if I'm going to, I have to stop playing the game of trying to fit in and stand out. And that's what the hope is with the show, is I stand out, and then they will be having to figure out a Carl DeGregorio type, a verbal kid from New Jersey, yes, but with a hodgepodge dialect who, throws French in there too, because that's part of his shtick. And, it just tell your story, and that's what it's really all been about. That's what the death session is about. The more, in a fucked up way, I'm trying to feed the large language model of hopefully an audience someday who understands the database that I've fed it with, And thanks to Shawnee Mac, we got on a fucking interesting story, and And I'm sorry to see the Monroeville Mall go, man. And Yin's gotta, go downtown, and you'll hear it. And I guess all this formality is what's fading away, maybe for the better. But it's inevitable as you age, and the things that you had to learn, or things you held dear, or the things you were proficient at that are now obsolete, that just makes you feel like, fuck, they are moving on without me. And in a lot of ways they are, and that's part of the aging process. But, I don't know. A lot of people wouldn't have been figuring out this YouTube stuff, this lighting stuff, or whatever the fuck it might be. You have to stay elastic, and that's part of what also these death sessions are about for me, is to keep the neural pathways, still. I can't stand the old dog new tricks, or the any of these axioms you can't teach. When I hear that, it drives me batshit. It's harder. Fuck yeah, it's harder. First of all, I'm not a dog. Second of all, not that old. Third of all, can't is a fucking quitter fucking thing. And you can, it's just going to take longer. And your will to master new stuff is a big thing. And my brother said that about medical school and drama school. It was like, there's some dumb motherfuckers that are doctors. I mean it. And he might even know some of them. But their will to put the DR on their fucking business card, or to wear a white lab coat, their will to pass those tests, to grind harder than anybody else with their dumb fuckness, had more to do with their success than their innate, than the rare genius who coasted through medical school, or who had all the ability and all the degrees, but just like couldn't, like if you puke at the cadaver, you're not going to be a doctor. So a lot of this stuff comes down to will. And I guess when I am bumming from week to week, it's when my will is low, or my fear of having the intestinal fortitude to push through the tough times, which aren't as tough as homeboy with the fucking disposable razor and a cup of coffee for his fucking rinse. I don't know if he even had shaving cream. I think he was just raw dogging that fucker, but had water in a cup. And so it's never been that bad for me, and it really isn't that bad. And life is bad as it is, or good as it is. So, my propensity for drama or self-dramatization is going to come in handy, but I have to delineate between life and art. And I think that will help me moving forward. So thanks for letting me harangue you with way too much needless information, but that's what this is for. And until a thirsty audience makes demands, which I would probably be remiss to follow, and I'm gotta make a note to not listen to the comments that will come eventually, but I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do, and maybe it'll catch on. And I'm gonna sign off, and I'm gonna try to remember to, you don't want to ever be as put upon as that poor bastard on the street, but do you have the fucking heart and the sack to still fucking keep your shit tight when you're up against it? So that's the aspiration this week. I'll see you next. That's Carl D. Session 58. No number shit. I came up with no numbers about 58. I'm blanking on what linebacker might have been a 58. But we are done, and I appreciate your attention. Peace.